Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Elisa Wad, President and CEO of DeVry University. We are excited to kick off this quarter's CEO Roundtable, especially as it follows some very interesting research we conducted this summer focused on upskilling and reskilling in an AI era. Before we go into that, I just wanted to remind folks that last year we set out to gain a better understanding of the state of upskilling in the US. And we wanted to identify barriers to ongoing professional development in the workplace in general. At that time, we launched our first annual report, Closing the Activation Gap, Converting Potential to Performance by Upskilling the Workforce, which actually revealed some very important information. The key finding was that upskilling programs often fell short of being accessible and equitable. We also uncovered what we call a say-do gap, which I'm sure you'll hear a bit about today. And what that means is, while both employers and employees acknowledge the importance of upskilling and say it's important for career progression and the future of their organization, many are not fully engaging in these opportunities. So fast forward to this year, we actually took our research a step further by exploring these challenges and opportunities through the lens of AI. With AI rapidly transforming the workforce, this focus felt both timely and quite frankly necessary. So we again partnered with Reputation Leaders this year, an independent research firm, and we surveyed over 1,500 US employees and 500 employers about their approaches to worker training and skill building, all centered around artificial intelligence. Our latest study is titled Closing the Gap, Upskilling and Reskilling in an AI Era. And this study provided us with fresh insights and is what I'd call complementary to last year's study. What we found in comparing the two is that there's a bit of good news and news that requires more of a call to action. The good news is that there are now reduced barriers to upskilling when comparing to last year's research. Yet we're still seeing that many in the workforce still are not participating in these upskilling opportunities, even if these barriers don't exist anymore. So today, we'll share more details around these findings and also take an opportunity to engage with industry leaders in real time on AI's role in workforce adoption and our overall preparedness to harness its potential. I am pleased to have my colleague, Dave Barnett, Chief Administrative Officer at DeVry, assisting me in moderating today's discussion. And I'm also pleased to have a group of panelists, including Lawrence Evans, CEO of Reputation Leaders, who played a critical role in helping us get this information within the study. Raj Singh, CEO of Accolade, is also joining us on our panel, and Maureen Cahill, Senior Managing Partner at McLean Company. So to get us started, I'm actually going to turn it over to Lawrence to unpack the survey findings, and then also Lawrence, I know you're going to be providing us some additional context before we move into a deeper discussion with the panel. So Lawrence, over to you, and if you could maybe even just go a little deeper on your role at Reputation Leaders.
Sure, Elise, thank you very much. It's an exciting day, a great topic. I'm the founder and CEO of Reputation Leaders. We are thought leadership strategists that help organizations like DeVry to tackle some of the biggest social and business issues of the day to help grow their business, grow their reputation. And there's probably no bigger issue that we're going to tackle than the one today, which is about the role of AI in the workplace. So I'm delighted to be able to share this research. As you said, it was done in June. It was done with 1,526 US workers and 581 US employers. And we'll start on something that they both agree on. If I just going to the next, And sorry, I can't see the slides. What they do agree on is that 9 in 10 workers and employers say that AI is going to help career advancement, which is that AI is essentially a must-have. But interestingly, more workers than employers believe that AI is actually essential in order to advance their careers. And continuing with that theme, it's interesting that 4 in 5 workers believe that learning more AI skills will have at least some impact on their ability to stay employed. In fact, more than half of workers said AI will have a moderate or a big impact on their future career employability. And in that, we also saw a gender divide. It was interesting that more men, much more than women, are likely to think that learning AI skills is going to be critical for their future career. And so if we carry on that theme around the gender divide, we saw in general, women are actually less confident and less fluent in AI as they report it. In fact, they see AI as being less important for their career. And across all of the measures that you see on the left-hand side of the chart, they're about 10 percentage points lower than men in terms of their understanding of what AI can do for them or for their employer. But that gender divide is also reflected in their uptake of AI skills and tools. So, for example, 41% of women would describe their AI proficiency as intermediate or higher, while 55% of men would say it's at that same level, intermediate or higher. So you can see there's a gap, clearly not only in importance, but also confidence and use of AI. What I found interesting was even in the IT sector, which you'd expect to be the most tech-savvy sector, there's still evidence that women are much less ambitious about AI upskilling than men. But probably one of the things that people on this call are interested in is what's the comparison between what employers are thinking about and employees are thinking about. And actually, there's a clear gap. Employers are just underestimating how much employees are using AI already. So, for example, 36% of employers versus 56% of workers report that employees are using AI already on a weekly basis. But I thought even more interesting was the tenfold gap between a third of employers would rate their employee skills on AI as being novices. Only 3% of workers would say the same thing. In other words, workers are rating their own competency much higher than their employers are. Now, of course, there may be some social reporting bias, but I think it's much more likely that perhaps employees are just hiding the amount of AI they're using. Perhaps they're using it at home and bringing it to work. Or maybe they're just using it for personal productivity and innovation, and the employers are not seeing that, but there's a clear gap between them. What they do agree on, though, is that the responsibility for training workers on AI rests largely with the employer. So clearly, employers and employees agree about that, and twice as much as for workers, for example. But there are some challenges with that. And the challenges are really about the training and the use and the access to AI skills. So, for example, 42% of employers and 38% of workers say they're not even confident that their organization understands how to train workers on AI skills. I mean, that's quite stunning, really, in terms of that level of agreement that they just don't have the confidence that their organization is up for it. And 9 in 10 employers say that they offer upskilling, but there's a clear gap because they also say only half of their workers are participating in some kind of upskilling opportunity at work. And so there's not only a gap between access and opportunity, there's a gap in terms of perception around their ability to be able to deliver AI skills training. I think also there's an issue around equity, because one of the things we saw in the study was that 72% of employers say that they don't provide upskilling benefits to all workers. And what that inherently means is that some roles, some workers, some segments of the workforce are getting greater priority, greater access, greater opportunity to upskilling than others. And of course, that raises issues around fairness and equity. So I guess there's some clear tensions around AI upskilling that we're going to look at today, Dave. And Firstly, I think around employer perceptions and the gaps around AI use and fluency, but also around the gender gap on how important is AI to careers and how important is it to upskill on AI. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing such interesting data with us, Lawrence. I think we've all learned from the report, and I know I'm excited for us to discuss it today. Let me open up the discussion with our panel, maybe with a conversation that just grounds us a bit in what's actually happening. And so let me start by asking, how do you all see your organizations or organizations you work with currently adopting AI? And as each of you chime in, maybe we could start with just a little introduction of who you are and what your organizations do today. But Raj, can you kick us off on this question?
I'd love to. So first of all, a quick introduction. My name is Raj Singh. I'm the CEO of Accolade. At Accolade, we help employers lower their healthcare costs and improve the health of their employees, really fundamentally by giving every one of those employees and their families a care team that's powered by a primary care physician, but people who understand their healthcare and their benefits, and in a virtual form, giving them all the care that they need so that they can improve their outcomes and for employers, lower cost. And so we do that for companies like Meta, American Airlines, and others. So, Dave, answer your question about how companies or how we are really thinking about artificial intelligence. You can imagine what we do as a company is try to reduce the complexity of probably the most complex system in the United States, healthcare. And that complexity lends itself well to tools that can automate very complex tasks and run them repetitively. So our view is artificial intelligence creates an extraordinary opportunity for automation of complex tasks that otherwise can be very flummoxing for human beings, but in turn provide simplicity to those very same human beings. So our people can deliver extraordinary service, which is what we're known for. So that's part one of the story. Part two of the story is, I think, maybe conversely speaking to how our customers are thinking about things. Every single one of our customers in 2024 is asking us a question, which is, how are you going to leverage artificial intelligence in your offering in order to provide more value to my people? And that wasn't a question we heard in 23 or in 22. And so it speaks to the incredible wave that we're seeing here around the adoption of these technologies, along with the incredible possibilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me open that up more. Lawrence, what are you seeing across organizations you're partnering with or in your own work?
Sure. Well, I think let me speak to what we found in the survey. And I think one of the things that surprised me was just the breadth of uses that people were finding for AI in their organization. I mean, there were over 16 different uses that workers told us that they were using. And the top ones of those were things you would expect. They're data analytics, using it as a personal assistant, using it for collaboration or creativity or automation, etc. But broadly, what happened is that people moved from novice to intermediate to expert. The biggest increase was just the number of uses that they found for it as people just experimented and played more. And 56% of workers say that they're using AI weekly. So that's a significant level of adoption.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for some of us, surprising as we looked at the research, right? And for others,
Sure.
not so much. Maureen, I'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing as you're out working with so many organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Maureen Cahill, I'm the senior managing partner at McLean Company. I lead our executive services practice. McLean Company is an HR research and advisory organization. We are nearing about 1,000 clients, meaning we work with 1,000 HR executives and their teams to take these research and insights and tools and really apply it in their organizations to accelerate delivery of key HR initiatives and deliverables, really to the end of improving business performance. And so, what I would say about where we're seeing organizations who are adopting AI well, because it isn't consistent, they're coming at it from kind of two angles. And the first is what I'll call a bit of a more structured approach. And our research and tools support this is, they're creating an AI strategy at the organizational level. How are we as an organization going to use AI effectively? Where does it make sense? Where are we going to place some bets? Because it does require investment. Once that strategy is laid out, there's some governance that needs to be created. And that governance includes things like guiding principles and policies. So that's a little bit of the more structured approach. And then again, those who are doing it well are talking to their workforce. And they're saying, how are you using AI? We know you're using it. We may not be very mature in our implementation, but you're closest to the customer, the client. You're using AI in different ways within your own life and within the workplace. And so there's this sort of combination of setting some organizational objectives and structure around the use of AI, but then tapping into the workforce to get practical, real examples of how AI is being used. And then going through that process of putting some use cases into place and piloting it, test, experiment. Lawrence said that. I think that's so critical. The companies that we see who are making the biggest strides have an executive team, an HR leadership team that supports the attempts and failures and learns from them, and how AI can really be used effectively in an organization.
Maureen, don't mute your mic just yet, because I do sort of have a follow-up question for you and for
Sure.
Raj as well. But let me tee this up based on what I just heard. So look, we continue to see rapid advancements in AI, no doubt, right? Coupled with, there's some promises out there associated with AI adoption. Raj, you talked about automating complex tasks, which then should lead to driving efficiency, enhanced decision-making, improving customer engagement. But I think we all know adoption, and Maureen, specifically you, right? You're watching what's happening across organizations. Adoption varies, and even within teams of an organization. So part of it could be, and this is a big assumption, right? But that not every organization has bought into the promises yet, or have fully realized these benefits after implementing some sort of AI technology in their ecosystem. Some reports indicate that the impact of AI is still sort of unfolding, and in some cases slower than anticipated.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, could you go a little deeper on what specific benefits, if any, you're seeing either at McLean or with other organizations you serve it, as it relates to the use of AI? We'd love to hear about the real sort of tangible impacts AI has had on your business or other businesses from your vantage point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lisa, you said organizations either not adopting or not realizing the full benefit. If organizations haven't gotten their head around that AI is here to stay and it's something they need to begin to figure out, they're already too late, because your competitors are doing it. I guarantee it. So that's just one my point of view based on the organizations we're working with and my own experience within McLean Company. But some of the benefits we're seeing, number one is productivity in the form of time. And so we're seeing tasks that can be either fully automated and taking off an analyst's plate or an individual's plate, and it allows them more time to do something of greater value to help the organization. So time and productivity, I would say, would be the number one thing that we're seeing. We are seeing mostly, and there's caveats here, enhanced client experience or customer experience. The use of AI, when done well, allows you to get to know your customers' preferences and tendencies better. And so you're better able to personalize the experience, if that makes sense in your business, to that client. On the flip side of that, we've probably all had some negative experiences with chatbots who we scream at, and right. So this is my caveat: is when done well. So the client experience can be enhanced when you mine that data and you learn to know more about your customer and then adapt to those customer preferences and needs, whether that's through product design, whether that's through how you interact with them from a marketing perspective. There's a host of ways we see clients doing this. And I would say the third way is ideation. It's just a great tool for generating thoughts and ideas and concepts and principles. There are risks, and I know we're going to talk about some of those. So if you're working on in an area that doesn't have to be precise or cited or perfect, but you want to generate ideas and get to innovation and spark something new or different, we're seeing clients encouraging the workforce, and the workforce coming back with lots of ways in which they're using AI technologies in that way.
Great points, and thank you for clearly outlining those, Maureen. I love the fact that you mentioned ideation, and that could tie into time, right? You're not sitting there spinning,
Mhm.
trying to think of,
Yes.
big ideas and inform your strategy in a room. You're actually, trying to get ideas externally as well. And you also tied back to the whole improving customer engagement piece, and you want AI to make sure you're doing that and not adding more friction to the process.
Yes.
Raj, I know in just conversations with you in the past and just even hearing you respond to Dave's first set of questions earlier, AI is essential at Accolade.
Sure.
If you could maybe talk a little bit about how critical AI is to Accolade's current strategy, and a follow up to that is, do you view it as a necessary component of your business model moving forward?
Yeah. So think about it. I think the question sort of breaks off into two categories. The first is where do we see us using it, or where do we see it having a direct impact on the way we deliver a service to our members? And to me, at least, the first area, if you think about the complexity of what we do, we're running down benefits issues that can be, as everyone knows who's ever experienced healthcare in this country, can be incredibly complex. Or, hey, we're trying to figure out if a claim requires somebody to pay, or if there's a copay on it, or if there's a deductible on it. And in the complexity of all those things, we burn through an incredible number of hours for our people who could otherwise be empathetically engaging with the members that they're serving and trying to use the incredible skill of a human brain to problem solve things that can't be automated or delivered that way. And so we're very focused there. And our use cases there, we think, will reduce the amount of time it takes us to respond to our members, will improve the quality of the response, because there are some things that we can automate that will deliver extraordinarily high quality rates, and will help the business scale. And so that's essentially where we're very focused. I think one of the things that is really important for the audience and employers to think about is, in order to get there, you have to make some investments in your business. And that part of the story is where we are in our journey. I think every employer knows we've got to go do something about AI. The question is, how do you enable your business to take advantage of those capabilities, in my mind? And so you're going to hear things from your IT teams, and Maureen sort of referenced this in her answer. You're going to hear words like Lakehouse and Data Lake, LLMs, and which LLM you're going to choose, ethical models around how you're going to leverage this, the way to think about those ethical models in application across your business. And those are choices that businesses have to make. And we have to get ourselves in a place where the platform exists with those choices so that we can enable our employees to actually take advantage of those things safely. And I would bet, having read the study and seen where employers are, that there's I thought one of the most fascinating parts of the study was that employees are further along than employers. Just absolutely a fascinating insight around employers have a lot of work to do to get the platform right. Employees are already using OpenAI and ChatGPT. And that to me was fascinating as a part of the study.
Great tie back, and 100% agree. And I think it all goes back to, look, at the end of the day, you've got to invest. I'm going to use the line that you use. You've got to invest, even if the benefits are still emerging. I think you often see, hey, I want to see the ROI. Oh, I don't see the ROI. And to your point, the employees are already interacting with AI, with GPT technology, et cetera. So thank you very much for that.
So let me maybe come at this from a slightly different angle. We're talking a lot about the benefits of AI, the positive impact that it has on the workplace, and where we are today. All very true and important. But there's also some risk in the journey. And so as we think about, one, where we think AI is headed, and two, where we stand societally and along the implementation curve, and some of the data that we saw about employees viewing their usage as much higher than their employers view that. When we start bringing some of those pieces together, what are some of the risks that you think are in the environment right now?
Maybe I can pick that up initially, Dave. I think Raj hit it on the head. I think the biggest insight and the biggest gap is the difference between employer and employee perceptions. Employer perceptions on both employee usage and competence versus what employees are actually using. And that clearly means that there's a need for some guardrails in place. There's a need for some direction, some policy, some active engagement, that you can't just leave it to serendipity. You can't just leave it to employees bringing their own AI from home. So I think that gap is the biggest risk factor. I also thought it was interesting that both employees and workers said that a third of their organizations are using AI for cybersecurity or fraud detection. And of course, the irony of that is that AI is getting so good that you need AI to spot AI fakes, because the level of deep fakes now is just brilliant. Yeah. It's just becoming really hard. So, it is like a thief to take a thief. So there's lots of risks coming up, but there aren't many guidelines.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think there's the known risks. We know that sometimes the AI in the large open access systems isn't always accurate. So there can be misinformation included there. And we know that the basis of whatever AI system you're using all of that content could have a bias in it already. And so it's going to produce and continue to perpetuate biases, perhaps. But I think there's another risk associated with AI that may not be as talked about. And, I'll call it the missing rung. And so if you think about how AI is being used in organizations, it is oftentimes used to replace or reduce the number of resources that I'll call sort of at an entry level. So, fill in the blank, entry level customer service rep, entry level paralegal, entry level researcher. AI can do a lot of that work today. But then tomorrow, you still need senior researchers and senior paralegals. And so how are individuals developing those skills if we're relying on AI to do that? And so I do think it's incumbent on HR executives to be thinking about the development of their workforce, depending on the use of AI. And if you're going to have some missed rungs, how are you going to help close it for that job family, that continued growth that you do need to address higher order needs in that particular function or area. So I do think that is a risk. I think the bigger risk is companies not tackling AI. So you've got to know what those risks are. You've got to have this triumvirate of your CIO, your chief legal counsel or ethics leader, and your chief HR officer. And together, you have to put your arms around those risks, mitigate those risks, and then figure out, how do I optimize AI within our organization, and how do I help the workforce do that in a safe and ethical and fair way?
Yeah, I think building off of Maureen's points, because I agree with every one of them, I think one, there are choices to be made around what data sets you're using. Remember, some of these AI models are being trained on the internet, which is like sort of the human, the entire sort of bolus of human information. That doesn't mean that all that data is correct. It doesn't mean that all that data is aligned with what you're trying to achieve. And so the data being used to train these models, is that data owned? Is it legal for you to get that data? Those are a whole bunch of choices that have to be made there that you need to be very thoughtful of. I think the second part, and I'm going to just build off of Maureen's point around, could we automate customer service jobs? I think one of the things businesses should have a philosophy or a perspective on is, am I doing this to lower my cost structure, or am I doing this to improve my service? And so we could very easily say, well, I can dramatically reduce the cost it takes to deliver the service, and I want all of that to be profit. Or you could say, I'm going to reduce the complexity that humans have to address, and I'm going to empower the humans that I have on my workforce to actually level the service up and turn it into an extraordinary service instead of a great service. And I think that there's a philosophical point. And by the way, I think this is a societal issue. Like, we're going to have to make a choice as a society, but every business is going to have to make a choice that's aligned to your own culture. What do you believe in? And if you believe that human beings can offer extraordinary value to the service you're delivering, I think you have an opportunity to say, I'm going to take them up the value chain and have them operating at the highest element of their data understanding. And that could be an extraordinary opportunity. Or we could just say this is a mass cost for cutting exercise, in which case I think the societal upheaval won't be trivial.
And I'll just add to that. And I think you have to keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. You may choose to try to really minimize the job loss reductions, whatever it may occur. But if your competitors are taking a different tactic, will your investment in elevating the service offset and still position you to compete in your industry or within your
100%.
domain? So, yeah, it's an and. Yeah, keeping an eye on that too.
I think that's 100% right. One way or another, your differentiation is going to change, and it could be cost, it could be service, and you got to determine if in your market,
That's right.
what's going to be sustainable. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I think there's so much interesting in that conversation. I note that out of habit, I keep taking off my glasses for dramatic effect. It's not, it's just habit, but it's highly dramatic. But in the conversation, it makes me think of a couple of things. One, it takes me back to a business class I took years ago that talks about our human bias to overestimate the risks of action and underestimate the risks of inaction. Right. And so you start to see some of that bias. And what I've heard you both say is there's actually a significant risk in inaction. And that risk comes from not keeping pace with competitors, with society, and with differentiation. And further, inaction can lead to a bit of the Wild West, right? It can lead to adoption of a tool and a resource that's not governed by organizational culture, that's not governed by organizational strategy, in a set of guiding principles. Instead, it's taking adoption and taking hold on its own. So in that, let's turn a little bit then to say that's all really interesting. And so we've talked about there's great promise, we've talked about there's great risk. Let's talk a little bit about so what do we do? When we think about mobilizing a workforce, when we think about upskilling a workforce, in a world that is relatively ununderstood or unknown to many, how do we start to prepare the workforce and prepare our organizations to move forward?
Dave, and I'll take it back to the study itself that Lawrence walked us through. The study itself says employees are further along than employees, which means all of your employees. And so Maureen brought up the point of what your competitors are doing. I think you could look at your competitors or you could look at your employees. The fact is both of them are moving. And as it relates to your employees, I happen to have a 22-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. They're both in college right now. And let me just tell you, they are. I'm not. Hopefully, they're the deans of their respective schools are not listening. But ChatGPT is writing the first draft of a lot of their essays right now. And the reality of the workforce leveraging these capabilities in their day-to-day lives, and obviously that'll be different based on age stratification, et cetera. But it's very, very high, and so. In that universe, we have to assume that these capabilities are being leveraged. What's your business's philosophy? And that philosophy point really ties directly back to culture and core values. What do you believe in? Therefore, what tools do you think we should be using? And then providing a framework upon which people can actually leverage it. Those standardized tools, that framework, that ethical philosophy or tie back to your core values and culture. If you don't provide that, people will operate in a wild, wild west that will probably come back to bite you in any number of ways, which could range from improper usage leading to bad outcomes with customers, all the way through to, hey, we're leveraging data that we're not technically allowed to use, which could create some legal issues for you. So I think it's imperative to get that framework nailed. And if you don't have the expertise inside your business, finding that expertise outside your business becomes really critical.
Yeah.
Raj, can I give a quick
Go
case
ahead.
study from our organization? We have a young researcher called Harry, and we decided that we were going to make him our AI champion. We gave him 10 hours a week and said, Harry, just go play. This week in Athens, Harry was a finalist in the Young Researcher of the Year Awards at a global market research conference because he decided he has no coding experience. So he asked AI to write the code for him to generate an AI app, which then does coding on open-ended text that saves 15 times as much time when you do open-ended text coding. And it's just brilliant, and it's commercial, and we're using it. But I think the thing that really impressed me was that Harry didn't stand there and say, I don't know how to code. He just said, well, I can learn how to code and AI can help me. So it really is about having an attitude or an AI mindset, I think, as much as anything.
Yep, I agree. The thing we're talking with our clients about are like the levers to pull. And the three levers, you guys have all probably heard this before, is buy, build, or borrow. So you can go out and buy the talent. You can go hire experts in AI. I will tell you the turnover rates in AI positions today are 20% higher than any other tech roles, and they're demanding a premium because we all want AI expertise, and there's not a whole lot out there. So you can go buy that talent, and you probably should for some key roles in areas where you're going to be investing heavily in AI. Build, that's building the capability within your own organization. So training, allowing your analyst to go ahead and play for 10 hours is one strategy, but there are training programs out there. McLean Company has training programs. Our parent company, Infotech Research Group, who does what we do for CHROs, for CIOs, we have extensive AI training programs. Go partner with somebody who can help you train the workforce on how to use these products effectively and safely. And then the borrow. You can borrow that expertise. You can go out and get contract support. You can go out and work with a consultancy. You can go ahead and hire contingent workers who have this expertise for a short period of time. And through that, build expertise within your own organization in that particular space. So those are the levers that we're talking about. If you don't have the expertise in-house to execute upon a strategy you've developed, then think about what combination, and it usually is a combination of those three, that organizations will need to employ to be successful in executing on their strategy.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And it's what I like so much about that is it doesn't deviate terribly from the way we've thought about talent and upskilling in the workplace before, right? Fundamentally, we can go to the markets and buy talent. We can look for brilliant students coming out of school. We can look for folks who are performing those roles inside organizations today. Or we invest in and build the talent within our walls and drive that. One piece that I've found interesting, and I encounter it as I talk to other HR leaders in the world, and I encounter it as I talk to our academics team and think about the way DeVry is approaching AI upskilling. And that's that AI skills aren't discrete. There's a number of skills that are unique to AI, but the impact that we're seeing on AI on durable skills, the transferable skills, the critical thinking skills, the communication skills, the impact there is really profound, and it's heightening the need for really powerful folks who can look at an output and ask the right questions to critically analyze what's been generated, who can take something generated by AI and effectively position, contextualize, and communicate that within their organization. And so it's leading a broader rethinking of not only direct, hard AI skills, but us to say, when we look at the ecosystem of skills, how will this impact what's most important to someone's success in an organization?
I have
Dave,
to piggyback off that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Dave, I think you've hit at the core of the gender divide, because we know
Yes.
that although men are much more likely to favor AI skills in terms of their importance in getting ahead, women value, as Elise will say, durable skills, leadership skills, critical thinking skills. Those are just as important. I guess the question is, how can we bring those two perspectives together so they're not either or, but they're and?
You took the words out of my mouth, Lawrence. Honestly, I was going to point back to the report and say, therein lies the rub. You've got men who are over-indexing on the need to upskill in AI, and you've got women who are like, you know what? Yeah, okay. I think durable skills and critical thinking are more important. And let's call out the elephant in the room here, which was at the core of some of this data. And let me go back to, look, there's good news in all this. The barriers to upskilling have lessened over the past year. So there are less barriers, but workers still not participating. And if I can just pull out a stat from the data, keep me honest, Lawrence, but nearly 9 in 10 employers say they offer company paid upskilling benefits, but
Correct.
estimate that only little more than half of the workforce, so I think it was like 55%, use those benefits. So it's right there in front of these employees, yet only 55% are taking advantage. And so the elephant in the room here is, look, there's I think a conversation we need to have around equitable access. And I think as AI continues to shape the future of work, this question becomes, how do you maintain that access, that equitable access to upskilling opportunities? And if we're talking about AI, let's talk about AI today, right? And I think, again, our research indicates that the challenge will lie in making sure that everyone, regardless of their role, their background, their gender, existing skill sets, has the opportunity to learn, grow, and contribute in an AI-driven world. So, whoever wants to answer this first can, but I'd like to hear from everyone. How do we implement AI equitably in terms of upskilling and building AI literacy across all workers, so employers can get comfortable seeing their workforce in more of an intermediate or advanced, from an intermediate or advanced standpoint, not just a novice standpoint? And what steps should organizations be taking? Yep.
I'll jump in on that one, Elise. So, Lawrence's research highlighted a digital divide relative to gender. Our research also shows there's a digital divide for people of color. And so, there's a whole host of reasons why. Access is certainly one of them. Skepticism is another. We're seeing the jobs most affected by AI are often held by people of color and women. And so this is a problem, and the digital divide is going to only get bigger unless we, as organizations and people in position of authority and leadership and decision making, do some things differently to really ensure access and openness to using this technology. And there's a couple of things that, again, our research has highlighted for us. First is you need to look at the teams who are responsible for the development of your AI tools and strategy. What do they look like? And because we're building systems based on those people's skills, experiences, and expertise, and those are often people who are not female or people of color. And so, looking at your development teams around your AI strategy, tools, and implementation, and then I would say. In addition to that, looking at that governance process, what is it that you as an organization are going to do? And it may require disproportionate investment in women and people of color, in the training that you're going to offer, in the opportunities that you're going to put forward in terms of projects. And so that disproportionate investment can sometimes feel uncomfortable for organizations. But I've certainly been involved in ways that we've done that successfully to make sure that where there are gaps, we're doing what we can to close those gaps. And then I do think there is technology available, probably AI based, that actually helps detect bias in your systems. So use those technologies if you're truly committed to really changing the trajectory of this issue. And then last, but certainly not least, is listen to your workforce. Listen to the different populations within your workforce. What has their experience and openness been? I think those are some tactics that we're encouraging clients to use to really address this challenge.
Yeah, 100% agreed. The only maybe two things I would add to this, in the interest of not repeating everything Maureen just said. The first is there's a word that employers don't like to use and almost never say out loud: mandate. Like, Can you imagine if
Yeah.
can you imagine if there's a universe where people showed up to work and didn't know how to use Excel and didn't know how to use email and didn't know how to use a PowerPoint presentation or project into Zoom? Those people would be at a profound disadvantage in working in 2024. We're heading in a direction where this sort of wave of technological change will happen at a pace that will dwarf what's happened in the past as it relates to pace of change. And so mandates, and those mandates being structured around defined methodologies around what should be built out and delivered, I think is really critical. The second part of that story, I run a services organization. We're a healthcare services organization. Our people are dealing with members every single day, whether they're docs, nurses, care advocates. We have to carve out time for them. Like ultimately, at some level, we know that artificial intelligence is going to profoundly impact the productivity of these people. But if I don't carve out a few hours a week for them to learn how to use these tools, I think there's a lot of businesses today who are saying, well, my tech people need to know how to use AI, and everybody else is just sort of, we'll figure out, like, we'll talk to them later. If we think about this, for me, it's 2,400 people. I've got to make sure all 2,400 are aligned on our strategy. And then those roles that don't lend themselves to an hour or 2 hours of free learning because I need people dealing with members every single day, we're having to impact our workforce management models to say we better carve out this time, or we won't get the benefits that we're hoping for down the road. And that's very front and center in our thoughts right now.
It's a great point. If you want people to learn, give them the space to do so. And, I think we're even learning that more and more at DeVry because, talent building, growing our, leaning into professional development, growing the capabilities of our teams is going to require time investment. Yeah. Lawrence, what about you? How do we remove barriers?
Well, I was going to add to your point, Elise. I think you not only have to make time available, we have to make it a no-fear environment, because we saw in the survey that nearly half, 46% of employees said AI made them feel less secure in their jobs. So there is an issue here around trust with their employer, providing a culture where it's okay to try AI and people can do it knowing that this is more likely to advance their careers than hurt them. So you do have to overcome some of those safety, fear, perception barriers as well. And it's not just purely around learning technical skills.
It's a great point. It's not just about removing time barriers, technical skill barriers. Make it safe. Thank you for that.
So, it's such a well-stated point. And I think I would just build on everything we've said to say, as we talk about a world of change and a world of hyper change, one, organizations historically curate who has access to upskilling and reskilling. We see in our survey the preponderance of organizations offer upskilling and reskilling to a select group of individuals. And as we talk about the rate of change, we talk about the number of roles that will be impacted by the AI revolution, we've got to democratize training and make upskilling something that's available for everyone, because that's how we maximize the benefit of AI in every role and every job. And in doing that, Lawrence, to your point, we've got to paint a compelling vision for folks to understand not what we're running from, not just your old role and the way work was done is changing, but instead we're learning about AI in the context of where we're going. And it's a newer, brighter, exciting place to go. And organizations have to paint a vision and they have to democratize learning.
Great point. Dave, do we want to see if there's questions from the audience? Because I know I'm watching the chat here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think we've seen some great questions come in. I hope everyone's noted I lost the glasses too, so I don't distract everyone anymore with playing with the glasses. But let's get into some of the questions that have come in from the audience. Let's take an interesting one first. Maybe this is an easy answer. Maybe it's a tricky one, actually. But one of our listeners said, my employer says not to use AI because the information won't be correct. How should I respond? What do we think? How should someone respond to that directive?
I don't want to tell anyone to disobey their employer. I think that's bad advice. I don't want to get
With the
anybody.
HR executives nearby.
Yeah, I don't want to get anybody terminated. I would say, to the degree your employer, maybe this is more personal advice than corporate advice. To the degree your employer doesn't allow the use of AI in the workplace, you need to be exploring it outside the workplace, because this is a technology that you can't allow to leave you behind. And so, male, female, race, color, creed, doesn't matter. We all have to dig in here. This is transformational in a way that's bigger than anything we've seen before. And so I wish your employer were maybe leaning more forward into this, because I think that'd be good for them as well. But I'd say make sure you're digging in, regardless of whether your employer allows it in the workplace.
There may be some mutual education as well, because there are enterprise AI versions that you can train on very specific data sets that your employer trusts, their own data, for example. I mean, 2 in 5 employers are using AI to get employee feedback, for example, that's entirely within their organization. So there are ways of training AI on data sets that are highly trusted, highly confidential, boxed around, all that kind of stuff, that I think can create an initial platform of safety, both for the employer and the worker.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And so, think about a research organization. We have millions of pages of content. And so we have a chatbot that today can open up all those PDFs using natural language questions and go in and provide a really comprehensive answer from dozens of sources that we trust, we wrote, and really elevate the experience of our clients. Like that, it just makes perfect sense. So I think the fear of AI is real. I think Lawrence's point about educating, but so this is an earlier data point. I think it's from 22, but 67% of employees were using generative AI in some form and not telling their managers. So if the organization thinks people aren't using AI, they're probably creating a whole host of risk for themselves by not having some of that governance in place and recognizing it's happening. And so perhaps a link to this webinar afterwards to the leader who made that statement might be helpful, or something in that vein of how can you help convey what are your competitors doing? Get some of that information into his or her hands, that might make them more open to recognizing that this is not a fad.
I think everything you're saying makes me think about the adage, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And I think as leaders, maybe to take the other side of the question, there's risk with AI. We've talked about those risks today. But as we think about AI as a tool that empowers people, not as a tool that replaces people, if someone's using AI in the workplace, that gives them great power and access to a tremendous amount of information and knowledge. But the responsibility that accompanies that is to be sure we don't take that output as a given, right? That we're asking the right questions, that we're thinking critically about what we now have in our hand, and we're contextualizing it for the organization. And so in using AI, those other skills become really important versus because it said so, it must be true, which is a very different approach.
Yeah, it changes content development to content validation and verification, right? And you can ask most open systems to cite their sources and then go to those sources and prove it. It still saves you a whole lot of time. And if they can't provide the source, don't use the data.
Yeah, 100%.
There are 2 questions in here, and I think one can go to Raj and one can go to Maureen. So I think this one's for you, Raj. Warren Buffett invested in 4 AI with his company, Berkshire Hathaway. How can I optimize to help healthcare organizations?
How can we optimize to, and so the question was, how can we optimize AI to help healthcare organizations? Is that right, Elise?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the critical parts of healthcare is so precise in its need to deliver personalized experiences. Number one, number two, you have to be right in healthcare at a higher degree of confidence than in almost any other industry, and that's true for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the obvious health issues of misdiagnosing someone using data would be a terrible outcome, but even as much as giving bad advice about whether something's covered under deductible can have a massive impact on someone's financial outcomes. And so we think what's required are commonization of ethical standards across the industry around what data can be shared, how should that data be leveraged, and what outcomes are we seeking. And to me, our opportunities are we do have whether and this is like a pretty highfalutin answer, but I'll bring it down for a moment. There are some requirements for regulation and alignment in industries around what we can share, how it should be shared, and what it should be leveraged for. That work hasn't been done yet in the healthcare industry, but it needs to get done. The second part of that story is we can be very aligned around personalization versus prescribing future events. And I think those two things are things where we can be really great in healthcare while being safe in healthcare.
Thank you. And then Maureen, has any research been done from companies who have implemented time for training, and if any new gaps, i.e. customer service, et cetera, appeared in reaching the customer? So if you dedicate time, is it impacting?
So sort of an
operations?
ROI analysis on the investment of training. Is that the question?
Yep.
Would you say? Not specifically that I'm aware of relative to AI, but I think there are ways for organizations to do some of that. And some of that depends on the scale of the organization. So for example, if you've got 82 customer service representatives and you pilot, this is how we're getting information is through pilots. You pilot the use of some AI application that accelerates the time to be able to resolve customer questions, and you can quantify that. So let's say I pilot it with 41 of my 82 customer service reps, and it translated into 22 minutes of time saved in a day. I can do the math, right? So it is, I think what we're seeing, it's through the piloting and testing and capturing of impact that you're able to then quantify it, extrapolate it out to say, here's what the organizational impact would be. And so a little of it may feel a bit like a leap of faith that you need to invest in some training to equip this pilot to be able to perform as you would expect. So it's probably a circumvented answer to your question, but that's what the approach we would take.
I think it answered it. Dave, I know you have one final question for our panelists, which should be a quick hit, so I'll give it to you.
Let me ask one question in closing, and I always like to do this at the end of a session like this because there's so much information. But let's bottom line this for everyone. For each of you, if you had 30 seconds, and only 30 seconds, to tell everyone the one thing you hope they take away from today's conversation, what would that one thing be? Raj, you want to go for it?
Well, I do. Number one, we have a responsibility to deliver a framework and a structure upon which your employees and your customers should expect you to leverage AI. That responsibility can't be abdicated. You got to jump in.
Awesome. Thanks, Lawrence.
For me, it would be employers don't underestimate your employees. Like a third of employers thought their workers were novices, and only 3% of employees agreed.
Great. Maureen, we'll give you the last word.
Yeah, so mine would be, there's a maturity curve to use of AI and adoption of AI. So exploration, incorporation, proliferation, optimization, transformation. Start. If you haven't started, start. And if you're already up that maturity curve, figure out how to get further up it.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we've had a ton of great conversation. And for anybody who's interested in reading our full research report, note that you can find that at DeVry.edu, and that information will also be sent directly to you via email following this event that you can link straight to. But with that, let me turn it over to Elise to close us out.
Great, thank you. I will try to make this quick. So big thank you to our panelists for sharing such valuable insights today. I think our discussion highlighted the incredible opportunities AI presents, but also the complex challenges that come with it, from exploring how we're adopting AI, whether it's integrating AI into client strategies, leveraging data, enhancing customer experiences. We've seen that AI is no longer a question of if, but how effectively it can be embedded into our strategies to really create true value. We also tackled the importance of upskilling and reskilling in what we call an AI-driven era. It's clear that while the benefits of AI are significant, we have to be fully aware of the inherent risks, and we've got to make sure that we're intentional about implementation. I think that the research that Dave pointed everyone to and that we've shared a bit of today helps highlight the fact that preparing the workforce isn't just about providing training, it's about creating a culture where AI is embraced and used responsibly, equitably, and we need to make sure that no group is left behind. Today's conversation, I think, also reaffirmed that AI is not just a tool or the flavor of today. It's really a catalyst for transformation and for the future. But I think it's worth reiterating that this transformation has got to be guided by thoughtful leadership, deliberate action, and a commitment to continuous learning. Our focus topic today further emphasizes our commitment at DeVry University, and that commitment is to equip learners and professionals with the skills essential to excel in careers shaped by technological change, just like AI. This roundtable discussion hopefully helped articulate that our dedication goes well beyond what I'll call the confines of our classroom. We are committed to our communities, our industry partners, and the broader sectors we engage with. And we do believe in the transformative power of education and the potential of AI to further amplify that transformation. And I think today's roundtable also reflects our belief in the importance of bringing together diverse voices from various industries. So, thanks again to our panelists. And for those of you who want to reflect further on today's dialogue or share it with colleagues, a recording will be made available. I hope you found this conversation insightful. I know I did. Thanks again to Raj, Lawrence, Maureen, Dave for an outstanding discussion. I think everyone offered very valuable perspectives on AI strategies and workforce readiness. And I think it's safe to say these are critical topics we're all navigating. Thanks again to everyone who's joining us. We look forward to continuing these conversations. Have a great day.